Hey guys, it's Dylan, and let's talk about BPM. What is BPM? Well, BPM stands for beats per minute. Basically, what that means is how many beats of a certain tempo there are in a minute. So, the easiest way to explain this, I guess, let's take 100 beats per minute, because that's usually a baseline. Basically, what 100 BPM would mean is there are 100 of those beats at that tempo in a minute. And you could use any number, 180, 160. All songs have a BPM, and that's just the rhythm of the song. A lot of songs have different BPMs. If you take Godzilla, for example, it's got a BPM of 166, I believe. And it's obviously going to have a way different BPM than something like Hey Soul Sister. I'm not exactly sure what Hey Soul Sister's BPM is, but I do know it's slower than Godzilla. That's a fact. But another way we can tell is by note divisions. This is something very important that I think we need to go over because I think a lot of players kind of struggle to wrap their mind around this because for some songs it can be very different. So a lot of the main note divisions that you will find in the game are fourths or quarter notes, eighths, sixteenths, as well as sixth and twelfths, which you find a little less commonly but are very important in certain types of songs and I might get into later in the video. So, for example, if we take Godzilla, for example, Godzilla's got a BPM of 166. That means there are 166 beats per minute in quarter notes, I want to say, throughout that song. So, in eighths, in Godzilla, this is what an eighth would sound like. Okay? Those are eighths. Sixteenths, on the other hand, there are 4 sixteenths between each eighth gap, alright? So, we have an eighth. Here are sixteenths. Right? There are 4 sixteenths for every eighth gap. Just like there are 4 eighths for every fourth gap. So you have a fourth gap. Wait. There's a fourth gap. And then eighths. Alright, so then you go. Right? And you're gradually increasing. So every song has BPM, and there are eighths, sixteenths, quarter notes. But then there are also twelfths and sixths, and this is where it gets a little more complicated. There are 4 twelfths for every quarter. So, if we go quarter notes in Godzilla, alright, quarter notes, here's twelfths. Alright, now, twelfths are sometimes tough to figure out because it's kind of hard to think about them when you're playing, but here's kind of how I think about it. So when you've got things like fourths, eighths, and sixteenths, I like to think of them in groups of 4. And when you got stuff like sixths and twelfths, I like to think of them in groups of 3. So when you have Godzilla, for example, eighths, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, like that. But when you've got twelfths, you're going to go 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Alright? Obviously, you can still think of it as 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, but it's not necessarily gonna help. It's kind of more complicated. It's more easy to think of it in groups of 3 because that's just kind of how the nature of twelfths work. But regardless, that's just how it works. Yeah, in Godzilla, the sixteenths are going to be quicker than in Hey Soul Sister because the BPM of Godzilla is faster than Hey Soul Sister. So 16ths in Godzilla would be like, whereas in Hey Soul Sister they're going to be more like, right? Much slower because the BPM is different. A higher BPM means you're going to have faster increments of notes at certain tempos. And that's just, so if you take a song like Godzilla, right, and then compare it to something like, I don't know, let's just say Duality. I'm not exactly sure what Duality's BPM is either, but I know it's lower than Godzilla. But someone might look at the notes on them and say, that's about the same, but it's not. There is a difference. There is a noticeable difference. So now let's talk about what does this mean in terms of BeatStar. Again, you're going to have certain songs that have tempos that are technically the same term-wise, but they are different. So a 16th in Godzilla is going to look smaller as a note because the song has a higher BPM, so they're in much faster increments. than if you saw a 16th in like, let's just keep using Hey Soul Sister, because if you see a 16th in Hey Soul Sister, the note might still actually be a full-size note because the tempo is much slower. So it does, looks don't always mean everything. And I'll get into that later in the video. But what's next? Let's talk about the sync menu now. So here we are on the sync menu. Now a little bit of insight from my good friend, Vertigo Music. This beep is actually at a perfect 160 BPM. Now what this means is that I believe this beep would be at every half note, I think. Sounds like it'd be every half note. But basically, this is 160 BPM. The whole goal of the sync menu is to tap when you hear the beep, and supposedly where this little green line shows up is where your sync would be. So a lot of people struggle with this, I find, and it's tough. The way that BeatStar has it set up is not very efficient, and personally I think there should be an option to hide the white bar, because a lot of the time people look at it and they try to tap to line up their white bar with the white bar, and that's just not going to do any good. Hiding this white bar would make it purely based on audio, and I think the biggest thing you need to make sure you do on here is tap hard so you can hear your audible tap lined up with the beep. That helps you get a better bass line. I also recommend that you generally play your game with speaker audio and sync. It's a lot easier to set up. When you play BeatStar with a Bluetooth device, I find, well, first of all, your sync is going to be much higher than 100, or whatever your generic sync is. It's going to be in the 300, 400, maybe even 500s. But the problem with Bluetooth devices is that they get desynced very easily. What I find when I play with my Bluetooth headphones, if anytime I tab out of the game, my sync is immediately messed up when I tab back into it. And I could not tell you why, but there seems to be this weird game delay thing where you exit out and go back into it, and it's just all kinds of messed up. And it really sucks, because Bluetooth devices are very convenient, obviously, if you don't want to have to play with your sound out loud, or if you're in a public space. So it's unfortunate, but it's the facts. Bluetooth devices suck for BeatStar Sync. So I generally recommend playing with speaker audio or wired devices, as I believe wired devices have similar sync to your speaker. So, like I said, your goal is to tap on the screen when you hear the beep. As you can see, mine's about 100, could be 90. Again, they should probably add increments of 5 on the sync menu, but 100 is generally where I feel comfortable playing. What I find is a lot of people actually feel comfortable playing on much earlier syncs than they need. Like, I'll see some people playing on like 30 or 20. I'm like, whoa, how do you have a sync of 20 or 30? I mean, every device I've played on has been like 60 plus. I know my old device was 60. Now I'm at like 90, 100. It's been 90, 100 for a while. I think this device used to be 60, but I think an update of theirs changed it. But then I also see people playing on negative syncs, and this is where I don't get. So let's just, this is milliseconds of delay. Let's just say 0 means there is 0 delay between the game outputting audio from the game's code to your speaker. 0 milliseconds of delay, right? That would mean your phone is perfect. You have perfect, there's no delay from that, which just already sounds impossible, because there's always going to be some sort of technological delay from it bringing the audio to your speaker. So how would someone have a negative sync? How would there be negative amounts of delay from your phone outputting audio from the game to your speaker? It doesn't make it really doesn't make any sense. So in my opinion, you should never have a negative sync as your correct sync. It just doesn't make any sense. You should never have a negative sync. Just like you should really never have a sync over, and I wish I could hold this button down, but I'm not going to do it all the way, but it goes up to like 700. You should never have a sync of 700, really. And realistically, unless you have a really awful Bluetooth device that just has a horrible delay, you should never have a sync of like, and for speakers, you probably shouldn't ever have a sync of like 200 plus. I think most speaker audio syncs usually stop at like, I don't know, 180 maybe. I don't know. I've never seen one over like 140. So realistically, you should be in somewhere in that range. But I think a great way to do this sync test completely unbiasedly is to take a cloth, place it over your thing, all right? Probably just like right there. And then and you can pull away the cloth and see where your green bar is. That's a good way to make it unbiased, so you know you're not playing off the bar, and it's an easier way to sync your game correctly. Alright, now I think I'm going to conclude the video with the topic of note sizing. And I know this is kind of a controversial topic within the Beatstar community. A lot of people like to throw around the term micros. I personally am not a huge fan of this term because something you will learn is that the size of the note does not matter in the way you play them, alright? A lot of the times, the size of a note in one chart can be the same as the size of a note in another chart, but they could be two different tempos. So I will use, for an example, and no one knows the micros there, those are 12ths, so they would be played at this BPM. Right? But then you've got the micros in Go, for example, towards the end. Those are 16ths, and they're played like this. Right? Then you've got small notes, which I don't know exactly what the terminology. I know people have like different sizes of notes, name different things. I'm just going to call them all micros because that's the term that gets thrown around, even though it's not really a great term, but they're smaller than average notes. Let's just take Sugar We're Going Down Deluxe, which if you saw the chart in my recent video going over the deluxes, you know that there was a lot of smaller notes, especially when they use them for jacks, because when you're stacking a note on top of each other, you get something called note scrunching. And basically, there's a combination of things that create note scrunching. It's a combination of BPM and scroll speed. And basically what scroll speed is Beatstar does this thing, and I think it's pretty universal between all charts, where as you go through each stage, the chart speed will speed up at kind of a gradual pace. So the speed of intro stage will be very different from the speed of final stage. So like, and we'll keep using Godzilla. Godzilla's intro stage it's not slow, but it's not fast. And once you get into that final stage, it's a lot quicker. But you'll notice in stage 2, there are some 16ths in Godzilla, and they look smaller than the 16ths in final stage. And the reason this is because the scroll speed is higher in the final stage, which means the notes don't have to be as scrunched. There's a lot more space for them to spread out. So instead of having these little itty bitty notes, because the scroll speed is so small, you have to kind of chuck them together, they can spread out just a little bit more. Now, there are some charts that have note sizing problems, like Time to Waste Deluxe has a bunch of these really tiny notes that have like big gaps in between them, and it doesn't make any sense. That, you know, they've shown in the previous patterns of the same 16ths that they don't need to be like that, and they've shown in previous charts that the hold note is not the cause of it. It's not like they need to be scrunched like that because the hold note won't fit. It'll fit, but it's just confusing overall. But again, the size of the note does not depict how fast you have to hit it, okay? Now, you could say technically it does, because you're not going to see like 16ths, well, actually, never mind. You can see 16ths of all sizes, all right? Like Go uses a lot of 16ths, but they're all pretty much full notes. And it's because Go has like a BPM of 110 or something like that. I know it's a lower, it might be one. Regardless, it's less than 166, which is Godzilla, and Godzilla's 16ths are scrunched. Now, comparing the scroll speeds, you know, one of them is a hard chart, one of them is an extreme chart. Oftentimes, normals have slower scroll speeds than hards, and hards have slower scroll speeds than extremes, but they all go up gradually. So, there is a difference. And with that, I really hope this video was informative to you guys. It was kind of tough. I had a script over on the left, but it's hard to follow it sometimes, you know. But I just thought I would give you guys some insight as to kind of how BPM and tempos work in the game and how to sync your game correctly, because I think that one of the biggest contributors to getting DPs is having a good sync. If you don't have a good sync, it's going to be a lot harder for you to time the notes, obviously, to the song than if you have a bad sync and you're going to be like all over the place, you know. It's very difficult. So with that, hopefully you guys have a better sync now and a better grasp on how note sizing and BPM affects the game. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.